Bring in your vertical center line, center of the chin, through the peak of the hairline. Connect those 2 points. And then you've got your bilateral symmetry, and this helps you to see everything against your center. Find this simple idea. See how the shoulders overlap? We don't usually see that. We usually see a nice neck over here with a head, but she's looking down. That's important. So we want to get the feeling of her turning down, and then look at this shape that you can find in here. We'll figure out where her face is. Within that, you need to figure out against your half how wide your shape needs to be. It's a relative relationship. It's a height against a width. The widest point of the head is over there of this outer shape. So just maintain that. Make sure that that's the correct distance from the top. That the wide point of that shape, the apex, like this way, is separating this big box accurately. If you do your box method, if you want to place a box around it, go ahead and always be working off of the center. That your center doesn't change. You have your outer limits. And then you can feel, you can even do this and take it. It's like, oh my gosh, this girl is so symmetrical. Negative shape. Look at how this is passing through. You can plan this out with tracing paper if you want. And then all the next things from there, you'll get like the widest point of the face, which are the cheekbones. After we do some skeleton stuff, we'll understand what the zygomatic arch is, like what this bone is doing. It's like a wedge interlocking. And this forehead is like one big bony mass. You should tape it to your page so it doesn't move. So here's my center, vertical center. That's my top. And this is about my width. I can already start doing tilts. I can see this and I can see that. That's a nice tilt. I can see that the wide point of that shape is like up here, and then it already starts to turn. And I can feel the shape that I'm building over here. I'm trying to match that shape. Let's see, where should the bottom be? And this is gonna keep shifting. It's just a start. I can feel her, I'm like almost breaking her into, I can feel this and then this, right, with her cheeks, the apples of her cheeks. I can start separating this rainbow shape and see how does that have to fit between. Look at how this takes you all the way to the top of the center. This has to be a little bit wider. The bottom of the hair shape have to be about that far from the top. And you see how they're aligned? So anytime I'm doing anything that's got bilateral symmetry, I've got to draw them both as one unit. And all the while, I'm checking that this shape off of the center feels right. You never forget to relate everything to the center. I need this to be the correct amount of height versus the face. So you don't have to draw as dark as I am drawing. I'm just drawing dark so you can see what I'm doing. And as soon as I get a general shape that I like, I'm going to check the height to width. I can now start taking curves and breaking them into more accurate tilts. I can feel that this is the side of her head and it's a nice solid bone under there. So I'm going for the bone. I'm not going for the dark shape of her hair. And this is like bow. And I can take kneaded eraser and get rid of anything I don't like, but before I do that, let's check some big proportions. I can feel that this is way too wide. That has to be thinner. And then once you add a little bit more information, like with shoulders, that should help as well. So I'm going to check my tilt by taking my straight edge, lining it up against the line that I'm suspicious about, and see what that gets me over here. You see the shape it creates? I'm creating this little triangle against the half. So, and it has to pass through the hair shape and end up with that much space. So it's got to pass through here. It's got to be a more extreme angle. And you're slowly correcting your inaccurate guesses. I'm going to check both sides, both tilts.
Would you say the eyes are the middle of the picture?
Draw your box around her.
I did.
I don't need to tell you. Take this height, go up, and it's exactly half of her face, but not half of her entire head. So it should be halfway between here. It might actually be a third. Look at this. From the chin to the corners of her eyes is 1, 2, perfect, 3. She should fit exactly 3 times. So if I have the right height and that shape, if I take that down, that should get me to the eyes. But I haven't checked my height to width yet, and I don't think that this is right. This looks too wide to me. I'm going to keep checking my outer shape using my tilt. I'm going to flick my eye back and forth. That's, yeah, let's make this nice. Use the very outer limit as a plumb line.
Very outer limit.
Very out, whatever's the widest point. So there's the widest point, there's the widest point. Whatever you decide is your widest point, right? Okay. And then drop a line. I like to have symmetry, so look, this happens to be the same as there. I'm feeling symmetry there, and I'm like, I'd rather drop a box down there. Forget the bow, I could just add that at the end. Once you have this, you can feel much better. You're just more aware of stuff. Everything has a kind of symmetry. So you want to see how things are divided. So always do this. In a portrait, horizontal center is the line that passes through the eyes. So through the corners of the eyes. And it's always going to be perpendicular to your vertical center. And you're finding how she's orienting her head in space because our horizontal center is so low down from the top. We know she's tilting her head way low. Just get your bottom, your top. So, you know, I like to guess these shapes first and then do my measurements. Clearly, the second you have a box, it's already easier to tell like how your shapes are doing. And keep your lines loose and thick. If you keep them thick and loose, it's much easier to, you know, to like edit them. So after you have a nice shape that you like, I do a lot of it just eyeballing it. Keep checking things against your center. I'm looking at negative shape. You know, once you have your box, you can feel negative shapes. Her neck is very important because it's more context where the fullness is. So I really like drawing with a thick line so that I have an option of shaving in. It's really nice to draw with thick, loose lines. All right, so I'm going to check my height to width. The width is from here. I decided to chop it off there at that bow. So the width fits into the height exactly like that. If I go from the bottom of her chin, that's how the width fits. I'm going to also go from the top, and it gets us to her eyelashes, to really the wide point on her cheekbones. So the hair is the widest point for me. So you want to make sure that these two blocks are symmetrical. I want to train my eye to see shape better and get as good a guess as I can before I check my height to width. I want to see if anything jumps out at me. Yes, I really don't like doing comparative measuring so much. I really like using my eyes more than anything. Feels more natural. I use measuring when I know my eyes are playing a trick, when I'm dubious. Anytime I feel stuck or I know that it's just a complicated arrangement of shapes and they're throwing me off, that's when I definitely go for a measurement. Or when it's a form that I'm not familiar with, when it's a very abstract, intense foreshortening, like I'm not used to seeing heads like that. I can't really get in there. I can't really latch on to anything. I can't feel the form. I don't understand it. That's when I use measuring. But do you see how I'm looking for a fullness? I'm not just looking at this as a tilt. I'm seeing that as part of this shape, as part of that fullness, that rhythm, and that will be part of this. So always looking for how that line can be formed with a convex. And I'm seeing how far it needs to be from the top. How does it pass through? What's that distance?
You know, it's amazing. The line of the angle makes such a difference, the outside angle line.
Right. And trying to unify everything too. How much a little bit of like unity does for all of it.
I've always focused on the features to try to get the features right. And it's that the angle of the outline is, well, it's not more important than the features, but it's just as important. It's really tricky. You need a protractor.
Train your hand to do it and your eye to see it. So a few things I'm doing. I like thinking about this as an interlocking form. That is a fullness that's like locking into this form that's underneath it. See how that's like a wedge that's under it? That's zygomatic arch. This is on top. So it's above it. So I like to think about that while I'm drawing the eyes, right? Instead of drawing eyebrows, I'm thinking of this as a form. Who needs to check stuff? When you're drawing the nose, you're checking it against the center, against the vertical center. How far does it, everything needs to be like the correct distance from the vertical center. So never forget that. It's important to draw in your shadow shapes. I know she has a very subtle one, but that apple of her cheek plus going down her face, it's kind of a shadow shape. When I'm doing the neck, I'm again relating it all the way through. Everything I'm doing, it's like, how do all the puzzle pieces fit together from one side of the neck to the other side? And then how far is that from the vertical center? How does it relate to the eyes and the nose? How do the corners of the eyes meet, relate to each other? What sort of distance is there between the jawline and the neckline? Relating the ends of the eyes to the ends of the corners of the mouth, corner of the mouth to the nose, end of the nose to the center line. And you know that when we're drawing the mouth, you can approach it as a ball, like a little sphere that passes through the nose. It's a nice way to get a lot of it in at once. Try and find little spheres and balls everywhere. I'm just taking the widest point on her face, relating it to the height, seeing how it has to fit within her height. It's got to get to that point, that far below so it's got to be about there. So I'm going to take that distance, the correct distance, and see if that gets me my width, and it's perfect, meaning that you can just draw. You don't have to build a drawing out of points that you plot. If you just teach yourself all the ways that you can guess accurate shape relationships. With your eyes, you're almost just more aware of tilts, you're more aware of shapes, you're feeling distances as you draw. So I'm going to keep working around and slowly just fix up anything that looks really off to me, and then recheck again. I think she's probably going to need a wider chin. I mean, a longer chin. Maybe her eyelashes can come down too. Okay. Yeah, that could work. Just commit to that for now. So little random tilts, I'm just fixing little random things. I see that the little break up here has to align with this inside of her face. Like with this part of her face, we got to make sure that that is working. If I just do a bunch of refining, I will eventually get that little margin of error that I can't account for. It'll find itself somewhere. So I just keep checking my tilts, looking back and forth nice and slowly, adding information that's not there yet. Yeah, in the drawing class, we'll be covering things like perspective, like just strictly, basics stuff. And you can't not do perspective.